welcome you to this first ever Zoom panel on planning lay-led worship services. This was kind of came up during the planning meeting for our Synod assembly, and the fact that includes for another year a Sunday, and that some people may be unhappy about that, but for other people's schedule, this works rather well. And I think we want to accommodate as much as possible, the schedules of lay leaders who volunteer their time, and clergy just have to adjust to the fact. That was what started the conversation, but then it kind of from there spiraled out into, hey, the church is changing, and maybe has relevance, some conversation like this, for a changing church, for smaller congregations that have different realities. So, and we'll get to all of that, hopefully. Could I ask the panel members to introduce themselves? And let's start with maybe Karen. And tell us, please, who you are and why you think you are on this panel, apart from the fact that you were asked, and about your level with lay-led worship services.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Deacon Karen Eidler, retired. I was commissioned as an associate in ministry in the ELCA in
When is the one this year?
1992. I'm sorry? I have served on staff in 3 congregations: Prince of Peace, Saratoga, California; Redeemer, Cupertino, California; and Lutheran Church of the Resurrection in Granite Bay, California. And I also served as executive synod on synod staff, the executive assistant to Bishop Mark Holmerud. My husband and I are currently active members of Faith Lutheran Church in Meta Vista. Why am I on this panel? I am on this panel because I was invited to be. And as a rostered minister of Word and Service, my life's vocation has been totally focused on fostering a congregational culture which helps people connect with their unique God-given gifts and skills in ways that can serve their lives, their personal lives, as well as their communities of faith, the church, and the wider world in Christ's name. My level of experience with lay-led services includes my 40+ years of membership as a lay person first in the ELCA. I've been active in lay-led ministries and my whole church life, including the years before I was commissioned as a rostered minister of Word and Service. I've assisted in planning, leading, and participating to this day in lay-led worship services, and continue to be a very active member of our ELCA congregation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Elaine, would you go next?
Well, my name is Elaine Whitney, and I'm a member of St. Francis Lutheran in San Francisco, and I'm a former vice president of our synod. And I was chosen because, once you serve, they have your information and they contact you. But you also, you feel more connected. You see more of the reason behind why we have panels like this. And so I was happy to be chosen and participate. My congregation is pretty active with lay participation in service and reading of the gospel, prayers of the people, assisting minister. I've been an assisting minister for about 15 years now. and really enjoy it. So I think that's why I'm here, or just because they had my number and they called me.
That too. Plus, I haven't seen you for such a long time. So that's a really cool opportunity to reconnect. So we had already a deacon. We have a former Synod vice president on the panel. We have a current Synod vice president on the panel. Simon, would you please go next?
You all, it's good to see everybody. I got to see some familiar faces here. I'm Simon Wong here, your current Vice President of this year Pacific Synod. Why am I getting chosen? Most likely because you can blame me as the starter for saying that, you know what, this coming assembly, we need a lot of lay participation. So I was the one who's basically saying to all the pastors and the leaders and say, you know what, let's have a discussions about when the assembly is going to happen. And up again, majority of those who I talk to say, with the lay participation, it is good to do another Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's one of the reasons. So blame me if that's the situations. Now, I am thrilled to be able to share with all of you, the excitement about, a late worship service. As some of you might have remembered that I grew up in Hong Kong, born in Hong Kong. My father used to be a Lutheran pastor before he passed. And at some point in time in my life, I've been working very closely with him, with a Chinese Christian broadcasting organization. And why? Well, it's part of obviously his passion, but part of it is also to answer a questions of if you think about it in a lot of other countries, especially in mainland China, that there's not too many, honestly, not too many uh, clergy support. A lot of time, it is actually the lay people who step up and say, you know what, I'm going to serve, despite the fact that I'm worried, I'm scared. And so, from that point of view, it is important for us also going into, moving forward as a synod to to support each other's here and encourage each others to step out to our comfort zone and being able to support your church and the bigger community in terms of talking about lay leadership for worship service support. So I'm thrilled, I'm happy to be here today. Thank you so much. Passing back to you, Pastor Gabby.
Okay, cool. So I've heard Simon talk a lot about capacity building, kind of when he and Bishop Claire Burkett made the rounds. And somebody who I believe as a past interim, intentional interim minister, Pastor Jody Golden-Lund, I believe is also a lot into capacity building. Is that right?
Yes. So I am Pastor Jody Golden-Lund. I serve Trinity Lutheran Church in Porterville. I am also a conference dean for the Central San Joaquin Conference, the southernmost part of our synod. I have been serving on the assembly planning team. So when we were talking about worship for Sunday morning of Synod Assembly, and we needed to think about worship for all of our congregations, I kind of got pulled in because of that. My congregation is really good with lay-led worship. In my absence, we typically don't have pulpit supply. I will have people within my congregation who will preach, who will do the prayers, and lead the whole worship services. So that's kind of, and as Gabi said, that I've have many years of experience as an interim and pastor. So doing interim works, I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of congregations and a variety of contexts, and to help lift up leaders in those contexts.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So my name is Gabriela Schroeder. Gabi. I am a pastor in Citrus Heights at Advent, and like Jody, I'm a conference dean too at Capital Valley Conference, so the area around Sacramento. Let me tell you a little bit what we have planned for you, for all of us tonight. So we will go kind of through 3 rounds as a panel and have loosely assigned different topics to different people based on their passions and their experiences. And we will first talk about the why of lay-led worship services, the who should be planning them, and then another round, what and when should we plan those? Yeah. So, and then after we are done with those 3, we will go and open this up to you guys and ask questions. Before we start, any questions from you guys? Anybody? Okay. Then in that case, let's actually start with the first round of question, and that would be Elaine. To first answer the question, why, from your perspective, should we encourage lay-led worship services?
Well, as Karen said, we all have these different gifts, and it's good to learn about people's gifts and help them develop those gifts. Also, occasionally you'll find someone within the congregation who might go on to rostered leadership. But more importantly, it's just that we're sort of sharing the load, and we are more engaged.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when different people read the lessons, you hear them a little differently. If
Mm-hmm.
you hear a young person read the lessons, there's a little bit of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
If you'll find out some people have a wonderful gift of prayer, and it's very special. And in that way, it just makes things a little fuller, a little more rich of an experience.
I remember hearing you say also on one of our on calls before how awesome an experience it is for somebody who helps to lead a worship service as a layperson. How meaningful that has been to you. Is
Well,
that?
the very first time you get to assist with sharing communion, you just see people so differently, and it just knocks you over how important it is to them because you're watching them in a different way. And maybe pastors just get to see that. But as a lay leader, it was just amazing for me. And it just made it more meaningful and made me feel more connected um, to members of my congregation.
Mhm. Thank you. Karen, would you like to go next?
Yes. There is a true, real connection between lay-led worship services and our Lutheran understanding of the priesthood of all believers. Martin Luther affirmed that all baptized Christians have equal access to God because all of us come to Christ through the work of Christ. We therefore bring and proclaim Christ to the world by building and affirming the legacy of our theology. It's as simple as that, declaring that we are all part of that priesthood and we're all saved by God's grace. And so we recognize that each of us have a role to play, a responsibility, a legacy that we need to live up to, which must be held in balance so that no one dominates the other, no one's gifts, no one's position as a chair, say, of a committee or a member There is no difference. We're all a priesthood of equal believers. And so we claim and we practice our Lutheran understanding when we help our laity identify those God-given gifts, as I mentioned before, and when we invite them to use those gifts in planning, participating, and leading worship services. And all ages should be included in that, from the youngest to the oldest. We need to collaborate with one another and our congregation's worship and music staff for assistance. And we need to identify youth that can play musical instruments, those who could be song leaders during parts of the liturgy. Younger children can serve as acolytes and help adults greet and pass offering plates. Good readers of all ages can serve as lectors. And also consider inviting Sunday school classes to practice a song to offer, either during the offertory or at the close of the service or during a processional or recessional. One of my favorites is inviting youth who happen to be taking dance lessons and teach them a liturgical dance that can be used during a worship service. Have fun planning, bottom line.
Cool. So we had Elaine kind of talk about the awesomeness to see community, see worship from the other side of those who are serving. We had Karen hold us kind of accountable to our Lutheran theological heritage. Simon had another perspective to this. Would you share that with us?
Well, Karen has kind of leading that, to what I'm going to talk about. Have fun planning, and believe it or not, that is actually important because I was just literally briefly talking about stepping outside of our comfort zone, all right? Of like, hey, this is usually what we are going to do for our worship, throughout all this different thing. We can actually obviously getting involved, other people. I am very sure that I see a lot of, familiar faces here. If I have already visited, your church, I'm seeing that a lot of lay participation already. So thank you for everybody who is stepping up. This is the opportunity also, for a lay-led, worship service, is that we can also have an opportunity to experience different type of how we worship together, different types of how we worship together from song choice. Don't be afraid of like, oh my God, I have to stick with Sundays and season. Yes, there is actually information for you. However, there's also a lot of songs that people would love to sing, different ways of singing it, trying out different instruments, just like what Karen's are saying. I will share a quick experience that we have. My pastor at Hope Lutheran Church in El Sobrante, it's actually taking a maternity leave right now. So on a Sunday, the Palm Sunday, well, we don't have a pastor. We were not able to find a pastor who can support us. Well, guess what? We are trying something different. We end up were able to just do the following. We're reading, the gospel together, but separate them into tongues so that we make it all like, kind of I'm not going to say musical, but, some sort of a skit to share everybody together. End up like people that is coming, literally like 80% of our, people who are coming in as, obviously, all late, work together and creating a wonderful experience on the Palm Sunday. It was literally just happened, less than a month ago. And that is something that you can always try out, the opportunity to experience different things. Now, I'm not saying that your pastor here, then you should just stick with your original stuff. You can work with your pastor also. All right. To allow you, to empower the planning together and create something a little bit different. Try it out and you'll be surprised.
That sounds incredibly fun and engaging, what you did there on Palm Sunday. Cool. Jody, Pastor Jory, could you share with us how planning lay-led worship services relates to the calling, the ministry of a pastor?
It is my responsibility as a pastor to help my congregation to identify their calling, to help them live into that calling. And as Karen said, we are a priesthood of all believers. And so part of that is worship. And so it is my responsibility to help identify the gifts in people, to see and to talk with them about what I'm seeing, um, and then to help give them the resources that they would need to uh, to to be a part of that worship service. To whether that's with the planning, with the execution, whatever, to give them, to walk with them, to hold, to accompany them as they do that.
So you're also their resource person then, pointing
Yes.
them to potential resources, no? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, and is this something that you should just do before Synod assemblies, or is this something that's a year-round thing?
Are you asking me that, Gabi?
Uh,
I think it's it's an all the time thing. It's not just as I mentioned, in my absence, my congregation will typically, the members will lead worship. They won't have pulpit supply. So this is something that's ongoing all the time, not just a one time for Synod assembly.
Mm-hmm. Let's briefly recap what we've heard so far. We've had kind of presented this as an opportunity, actually, not a crisis solution or so, but an opportunity to empower people to claim their spiritual gifts. It's squarely rooted in our Lutheran theological heritage of the priesthood of all believers. It can provide opportunities to do things differently, in new, fun ways. And it can also help, especially smaller congregations, to build resilient congregations. Is that sort of what you heard so far? And yeah. And then let's start with our second round. As I said, we will go through 3 rounds, kind of trying to organize all the many things that came up in our conversation as a group when we brainstormed. And later we will definitely open this up to others. So who should participate in the planning process? We've heard from a pastor, we have heard from 2 lay leaders, and from a deacon. Who should be part of a team that plans lay-led worship services? And feel free, any of you 4, to jump in.
Oh. 2.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to jump in, Pastor Gabby. I think, who should participate in the planning process? Everyone. Everyone. Why? Because honestly, just like what Karen has said, everybody is the, it's talking about the priesthood for all believers. Those who are able to say, I want to try something, else, definitely would step up and want to be part of it. Obviously, sometimes, pastor may be the one who is going to make that initial effort of like grouping people in, but I would definitely say, the pastor, perhaps, if the task is being, worked, or being initiated by a deacon, good start, your musician, right? Those who doesn't have to be regular, but those who step up and say, you know what, I actually can be part of it and read the read the gospel, or leading, maybe sharing a little bit of the experience, based on the topic that you guys are going to set up. If you're actually trying something new, then definitely, include those that for the pastor, include those you feel, that is important for the planning process. Sometimes you might have to include those who are operating your what is called the your audio and visual technicians too, because some of you may be still broadcasting your worship to the general public. So
Uh-huh.
that's why I say everyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
So imagine there is a team that plans a service. Who should be on that team? What kind of people with what kind of gifts? So we've heard AV, we had heard musicians, but maybe it's somebody who is in their regular life a school teacher and really doesn't is used to standing in front of a classroom and wouldn't have that much adjustment, or maybe a poet or somebody who happens to love making video clips or so. Pastor Jody, do you have any ideas about who would be really good to have on a team like this?
I think it's the people who are motivated, the people who when you talk to them express an interest. So you're the people who are involved. Kind of it's knowing, also again knowing the gifts of those who are in your congregation, and being able to identify kind of, and the people who will work well together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good.
Also, Gabby, I think it's really important to remember to include not only the pastor, but the current lay staff that are part of planning worship on a regular basis. Absolutely, your music staff, your organist, your pianist, any worship team that might be already in existence that works on a regular basis with their pastor to plan worship services should absolutely be included. They have important skills and expertise to offer. And then from there, you can add unique things. Like you were talking about poets, and I had mentioned maybe liturgical dance, maybe a small group of youth that's really excited about playing in a band. And they could offer that Sunday, or a violinist or a pianist of any age in the congregation who could offer that special music. You can just think outside the box and again, have fun. Just have fun.
Listening you talk, it varies really also by the size of the congregation. You casually mentioned paid lay staff, you mentioned musicians in the plural, you mentioned a youth group, and the realities of many of our smaller congregations are that they don't have paid lay staff and youth groups and all of those other things. Yeah, so it really depends who is there and what. Yeah. Anyway.
But there are many talents in even the smallest of congregations. And it's a matter of tapping into that, identifying it, and then invite people to share those gifts.
Yeah. And in our conversations, we got really excited.
Okay, thank you. How are you?
Whoever has their mic not muted, could you please mute yourself? There is quite a lot of sound going on. So we got so excited kind of brainstorming about different things one might want to do during lay-led worship services that don't happen on a regular basis on other Sundays. Do you guys want to jump in and share some of that excitement? Karen, you were just overflowing with ideas, I recall, and Simon as well. Yeah.
Well, I know that in most congregations of any size, when pastor's away, one immediately thinks, who's going to preach? So that's a critical time during the service. There are many good lay preachers, so that's one thing that can be an ongoing identification process of who loves to preach. But also there are other things that can take the place of that traditional sermon. And one of my favorite is acting out the gospel reading in a short drama or in a reader's theater. And there are many resources to do that. And I will just put my name out there that if someone wants to email me for some suggestions of resources, I am more than happy to do that. There,
Sharon, maybe you could put your email in the chat.
That
yes,
would be great.
I
Yes.
will do that. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'll let someone else speak, but that's one of my most favorites. There are resources. Witnesses to the Cross. This is a Lent resource that I've used in more than one congregation. Anyway, I'll let someone else.
Simon, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was just want to follow up with what Karen is suggesting, as I shared before early on that my church was playing a skit. There's not much, honestly, any kind of resources or planning because it was a very quick, idea. Once we were talking about it, through some lay leadership at the church, and even sometimes of just having a person who is, at least just like read through, kind of the story once and assign like, hey, one is going to be Jesus, another one is going to be the disciple, another one is going to be the donkey. However we want to say it, even with just that, it was a surprising uh result, that I want to share, on that Palm Sunday. It was a surprising result because all of a sudden you engage everybody. People who were originally saying that I do not want to speak in front of the microphone, all of a sudden step in front of the microphone and start talking and start smiling. And that is, you know, it's the magical thing that you can actually do. I also saw that, there's a comment about like talk about music, like for example. Yes, it sometimes it can be difficult, but one time, our pianist was actually having her wrist broken, and so we have nobody playing piano, and the only thing that we are doing is, believe it or not, Simon Wong has actually some, at some point in time in my Lutheran church life here, I recorded about like I don't know, about 100 songs. It's literally just I'm not going to say that I'm a good pianist. Somebody else can be a better pianist than me. But my church just doesn't really have that capability. So recordings, and yeah, it's not going to be as flexible, but unbelievably that people will follow through because they sing those songs together already multiple times, throughout their life. So that's one of the other ways to do it. Pre-recording sermon can be an option also, right? Uh, the only problem is then, yeah, you will have to figure out a way. There are resources also that you can actually find, pre-recorded sermon in a couple of those Lutheran websites. I'm pretty sure that Karen or some others, or even myself, can actually help, putting the informations together for everybody. It only require you to then set up, obviously, someone who are able to pull out your projector and or your TV or whatnot, but it's also very fruitful. So that's so other ways to do stuff like that.
So far, we have focused kind of on that part of the service. That's the sermon and suggested alternatives to that, whether it's reader theater or whether it is something else. What could be alternatives to a sermon that don't involve talking or reading?
Well, we don't want to forget the service of the word.
We get to that, yeah. We get
Yes.
to communion, but let's explore a little bit. I believe we talked about service activities, not a worship service, but a service worship, doing something together. Any thoughts about that, Elaine? Do you have any experience
Well,
with that?
we have had some meals together
Mm-hmm.
that were more about our time together and an understanding of a concept like generosity or hospitality, or this is how Jesus gathered with disciples and serving one another. But also it is joyful to engage in a service project
Yeah.
together. Um,
Letter
Cleaning
writing.
up the churchyard
Mhm.
and then having a little coffee together
Yeah.
and prayer. I
Uh-huh.
mean, because it is about connection as well as some of the formal things that we
Mhm.
do for worship.
Mhm.
Mm.
Cool. So letter writing, bread for the world, advocacy, or why have the worship service in the sanctuary that Sunday? Maybe around tables in the fellowship hall or so. Yeah. Karen mentioned already the service of the word. So another thing that we kind of thought needs to be addressed is what do congregations do with communion when they don't have an ordained person? Does anybody want to jump in there? Our four panelists still. What can congregations do? Pastor Jody, do you have a thought?
My congregation typically, when I am not there, will we do the district services. There would be no communion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they, you know, they feel like their worship without communion is still legitimate worship.
Mm-hmm. And Um, Karen Eidler mentioned the service of the word already. Can you a little bit kind of expand on that?
Well, we have a setting of a service of the word in our ELW. It's on page 210. Any of the 10 musical services for Holy Communion may be used to begin a lay-led service of the word. The other thing you can do is add litanies on that particular Sunday. After the greeting of peace in each of the settings, the service can then continue with the Thanksgiving for the word section, which is found also in the ELW then on page 219. So
Mhm.
that's a basic overview. We have it available, and that's a beautiful service.
What do we do with congregations that ignore everything ELCA tells them and has communion?
Our pastor pre-consecrates the elements,
Mm-hmm.
and we share it in the same order.
Mm-hmm.
And what's explained, it says, when we were last together, and then they explain that, they go through it, but that our pastor, we, because of things that happened during the height of the COVID era, when we came back together, the elements were, um, she always has pre-consecrated elements in case she and no one else is available to come and consecrate the elements on that day. And I saw a question in the chat. Yes, we serve each other,
Mm-hmm.
but that is part of what at my congregation we always do. Although the pastor generally does the bread, uh, lay leaders do the wine and the juice.
Mm-hmm.
So someone steps in and also shares the bread portion.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that is not different from bringing communion to somebody's bedside or somebody's home or nursing home. I mean, that's the same language, the same theological construct behind that. Yeah, that's an extension of the table. And in this case, the table may have been the extension of a table that at which we were fed a week prior or so. Yeah.
Which we do. We
Yeah.
have lay leaders who visit,
Yeah.
who do visitation
Mm-hmm.
for our shut-ins,
Yeah.
and we take communion.
Okay.
And Pastor Gabby, this is Simon. I think at the end of the storyline is what is your members feeling comfortable with? All right. I think that is one of the key factor that everybody needs to put in their mind. Some churches may be okay, some other people might not be. I think it's a matter of, sharing that, ideas to, your church and talk to your pastor, or if I'm not going to put more work to the deans, but if you happen to be that your church doesn't have a pastor, contact your deans. Tell them that, hey, we have a situations like this. What happened? When I grew up in Hong Kong, we do not have every week sacraments. We do not. We only have communion first Sunday of uh, each month.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons are very simple because we were not able to afford to have a full-time pastor. And so therefore, majority of the time it's our clergy will have to rotate. So the church that I'm going to with my father at the time, we're able to serve first Sunday at the church, communion. Here we have to go to visit another church on the second Sunday and then provide community in other churches. Third Sunday differently, fourth Sunday differently. And so, yeah, that will be some, changes that need to happen if you don't have, sacrament in place. And I'm a strong believer, just like, Pastor Jody and also Karen talking about like the service of the word too. It's also it's the same. It's powerful. My church has been using it a lot of times, following the ELW. For the service of the word, and it works out really well. So those are good
And
recommendations.
and also, Simon, if I would simply add that one of the critical pieces for our ELCA congregations is to start with the full fourfold structure of Lutheran worship, which is gathering, word, meal, and sending. And if you start there, it makes the process go, I think, more smoothly. And then always make sure if there's any question about the content in terms of theology or embracing our theology as an ELCA, that's when you want to make sure that you're consulting with your pastor and others, a dean or someone to make sure that that is in place. That will ensure that people walking in the door, visitors and members alike, will know that they are actually in your congregation worshiping that Sunday.
So the last thing we wanted to kind of address is, let's assume you are all now emboldened, you're curious, you're engaged, and want to plan a worship service for the Sunday of the Synod Assembly. When should you start?
Right now.
Right now, because it takes a lot longer. If there's a group involved, if you want to recruit people that maybe not ordinarily are involved in worship leadership or so, it starts sooner than later. That was, I think, our just unison recommendation, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there was one question asked here about whether the synod, whether the bishop's office or the deans have lists of substitute musicians for smaller congregations who may not have a church musician. As a dean, I am not aware of any such lists. Unfortunately not. What we have are lists of pulpit supply, of pastors, but musicians not. But I think maybe the local high school or community college district might be a good resource in my experience. Yeah. Or if you happen to have a university with a music department nearby, it's a good starting point. So,
Yeah, and again, you don't have to always I have to get into a certain level, of a, I'm talking about like music level or a certain level of reading so that you can do it. Sometimes it's just again, stepping out of the comfort zone and just do it. A lot of touching music that I personally have experienced. It's not about how much you can play like Bach or how much you can sing like Pavarotti, but it's truly that the people who are opening up their hearts and sing. And even though if they are not in a perfect tone, you know, you
Yeah.
know, it's a God gift, you will be touched.
Mhm.
A lot of people might be jumping into conclusions say that I have to sing a new song every day. So, man, I need to actually find something that is like rock music with drums and stuff. Well, I encourage everybody to think about it this way. Every day is a brand new day that God's given to all of us. And so every song that you have sung before is a brand new song for you. Even if that is the song that is 100 years old, it's a brand new song for you. God is using that song, using the word, using the people who are willing to step up to touch everybody's heart. And I think that is the key of, why everybody should be participating in a lay worship service together and work together.
Thus,
That
if
is what I
you
want to
were
share.
to if you were to play a song that is not 100% perfect, or if you sing and you don't sing like Pavarotti, it might give permission and encourage the next person who is just like you, then also to utilize their gifts. Yeah. And my congregation, we have this regular mantra. If something goes wrong in the worship service, if we yeah, and they do. So it's a worship service. It's not a performance. Yeah. So let's move on. It's a worship service. Um, so I think we have reached kind of what we wanted to address based on our own brainstorming, but there are only 5 of us and there are a lot more of you. Are there questions that you would like to ask? And I may not see everybody. I'm going back and forth through both screens. If you have a question, why don't you just start talking? Yes. Gwen?
A couple things. Paradise Lutheran Church, we don't have a pastor and have not since before the fire that burned down our town. A year before that, our pastor retired. So we are a lay-led congregation, just like when Jesus was alive. And when we do communion, we are under the impression, Simon, you can probably help me with this, that our understanding is that as long as you have a rostered Lutheran lay minister in the congregation, that the consecration is, I don't know is it valid or, anyway, I got to tell you, we don't really worry a lot about that, but we do have our music director is a rostered lay minister in the ELCA, but he prefers to play his guitar. So we are run by all lay ministers. We have, Carol, how many? 8 homilists. And this is over the last 2 years. We've evolved. We just put out the word. We just said, you know what? We're a small town. Our town burnt down. We only have 45 members. We can't afford a full-time pastor. Nobody wants a half-time pastor. We put out a call. There were no takers. So we're doing it. And it's working.
When the panel started talking, sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead, Gabby.
We wanted to encourage people to try out new things. We, I think, had an agreement. We didn't want to be your communion or your worship police. And we also were kind of aware that times are changing, that there are way more congregation like yours in Paradise, yeah, that we need to over time develop new ways of doing things, to build resilient congregations that can pivot again and again and again. Yeah.
So I also want to add that our Sunday worship, we have Eucharist every Sunday, but I would say we strictly follow the liturgical pattern of the ELCA Lutheran worship. I mean, we follow the Red Book. Because we're Lutherans. So it's not, we don't there's nothing that isn't very, in my opinion, kosher in terms of what we're doing. And from what I can see, and Simon, you know who we are, and although
I'm about to say hi to you, Gwen, and I remember wholeheartedly about your worship. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's really beautiful. We are getting new members every single month.
That's
we had 15 new members last month, and just this month we've gotten a new family and a lady in the last 3 weeks. So it's gradually coming. But people are, you know what they're saying? 2 things: we're the most welcoming church they've ever been to, and they're looking for a home. And that's what we're hearing.
Awesome.
But anyway, all this stuff you said is very interesting. We'd love to have liturgical dance. Well, I would anyway, and we'd love to expand, but we're only a handful. Almost everybody in our congregation has a role in our church. Almost every single person.
Cool. That's
and
great.
It isn't just, of course, for worship. We also have service, and there's our free lunch program, and a lot of people are doing that. So, and everything else.
Well, thanks be to God. That's wonderful.
Well, anyway, so I just wanted to say that in terms of the Eucharist, we as far as we know, we're kosher.
Okay. Anybody else wants
to make a comment? When I was a kid, we did have communion once a month. And then quite a while after that, we started having it all the time. And everyone said, oh boy, we've progressed here. So now when the pastor's not there, if we don't come up with some way of having communion, people says, oh, we're going back to before. We're not progressive anymore. I think there's a attitude change from when we had it once a month that was expected to now every day, every Sunday it's expected. I have not seen a problem with coming up with some way of consecrating it when the pastor is not there. Some people disagree with that.
Okay. Yeah. When Simon mentioned his dad and kind of the churches that maybe had communion once a month or so, I was also reminded that my husband used to be serving as a pastor in India, and that's exactly how they did things there too. Yeah, he had 4 congregations in 4 different villages, and yeah, I think whatever works for your particular context is the right thing to do, whether it is once a month, 4 times a month. Yes. Gwen, okay, good. Anybody else wants to jump in?
I want to jump in quickly for talking about comfort zone. Because of my background, my dad used to allow me to, or not allow me, force me to do some stuff, being a pastor kid. When now I'm not a pastor, and I sometimes have to, get out from my church and actually visit some of your churches and say hi to all of you. I tend to have a concern about like, hey, what will happen if I'm going away, because I used to be doing, audio visual and, the prayer and all the other stuff, or being an assistant minister to my pastor. It was number one, my pastor would tell me, Simon, don't worry about it. All right. Others will step up. That's what she said. Like, okay. So I got that confirmation that I can do it. Guess what happened? Next step is it's unbelievable of what's God is going to do to all of us. My son said, Dad, I've been learning how to do the audio visual. Don't worry about it. I'm going to step up. I'm going to do it. Well, am I worrying about it? Absolutely. Did my son school up a couple of times while I was happened to be at my church seeing the microphone drop on the floor or camera panning into a I don't know, wrong direction? Oh, absolutely there. I tends to like try to reach out and help, and I was being blocked by my wife and say, all right, let it go. Let
Uh-huh.
them do it. Let's
Yeah.
try it out.
Uh-huh.
That is important because that is how we are going to, be able to step outside of everybody' comfort zone. And there's not a specific, from my point of view, office, personally, there's not a specific way that you have to follow it. Yes, sometimes it's bound by tradition. Sometimes it's bound by, expectation. But on the other hand, it's when you are allowing the Holy Spirit to flow through you and the people that are stepping up to do the work together. Again, amazing things happen. We all just have to put our guards down and allowing this to happen so that we can experience different things. So that's what I want to point out to you.
Are there other things we should have mentioned, should have addressed, you wish we had addressed? Yeah, Gwen?
Only that there's lots of different music out there.
Mm-hmm.
And our church uses all kinds of sacred music, not just the Sundays and Seasons Protestant stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We use a lot of the St. Louis Jesuit stuff. We use some Jamaican stuff. The Black African stuff. Anyway, and Faith Lutheran down in Chico, whose pastor, as you probably know, is Ben.
Holohan.
They've got a wonderful repertoire. And after the fire, we all worshiped down there for a couple months till we reopened, and we got a handle on a lot of other great stuff. So our music is very versatile. And in my opinion, Carol, our council president's here too. I don't know if she'd agree, but Carol, let me know what you think. I honestly think that our homilies and our music is what is drawing people. And the fact that we don't have the same person every single Sunday doing a homily has really enlivened people's spirituality. And see, there's that and the music. What else was I going to say? Shoot, I had one other point. Anyway, I don't know. Carol, do you have anything to add? Okay.
I want to make a little bit of a plug for our Synod Assembly speaker, because I think a lot of people who will hear her talk or experience her will have afterwards, will walk away with really great ideas for different type of homilies. Pastor Rebecca Anderson, is that right, Charlene? She is from a church in Chicago, Gilead Church, and UCC pastor, and she is a storyteller. And her church utilizes storytelling a lot in their ministry, and she will hopefully guide us and turn us into more experienced storytellers. So anyway, just as an additional idea. Anything else? Elaine.
So congregations could watch part of the closing worship service for Synod Assembly as well.
That is difficult with the timing. I found last year there was a 10:30 worship service, and what does our church do who normally worships at 9:30? That's hard to get people to come an hour later. So yes and no, both there. Yeah. Okay.
This is Pastor Crystal at Emmanuel. Last year our church did use the worship from assembly, and we usually start at 10. And so what we decided to do is pivot and offer coffee hour beforehand, and then have people then move into worship. And that seemed to work well for them, from the feedback that I got. And I thought it was a good opportunity for them to experience a different type of worship in the larger church body experience. And they also then needed to find lay leaders that could then pass out communion, because I was not there to do that, and other parts of making sure they got the technology set up so that they could watch it. So in its own way, this was lay led, being able to tune into what was going on at assembly, and they were able to pivot and made it work starting later. In our setting, that seemed to work for them.
But Pastor, we've never done it that way.
I was glad not to have got that response. They were very open to coffee hour beforehand. Good. and in participating in that worship experience.
Okay.
Boy, that sounds like something we might seriously consider, but I have no idea how to work that technology. Will the Synod be showing us how to do that?
So it's going to be a YouTube channel. Literally, I know for the fact that some churches are doing one gigantic screen and they watch together. I learned from another church that telling me later on that instead of setting up, things like that, some people decided that just like this situations right now, they just utilizing the church Wi-Fi and they bring their own iPhone or Android phone and watch the YouTube channel together too. Now, of course, that you need to have a bigger bandwidth, obviously, for internet, but it surprisingly work out. A couple of churches who have about like 10 or 15 people sitting together in a table and watch the YouTube channel together, worshiping together in a round table. That can be done too.
TV, if not a screen or so, not a projector, then maybe gather around a TV. So YouTube is pretty easy to access. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to actually ask everybody to think outside the box too.
Yeah. We usually stream our we do Zoom service, and we put the people that are joining from Zoom on a TV screen in our sanctuary so that they can feel a part of the worship and we can see those people. So we just streamed it to that TV in our sanctuary.
Yeah, that's a good way to pass it, Crystal. I also want, again, I've been talking about like think outside the box. You can gather, just like what Pastor Crystal said, getting early for coffee hour. Pastor Gabby and Karen's talking about like service worship or service activity. You can actually do that early on. Even walk around your church block can be a service activity. You know your community, say hi to everyone, right? And believe it or not, sometimes church is not just your building with a steeple and a stained glass. Church can be your home also. Maybe that particular Sunday, some of you might open up your house and say, you know what? Let's just get together to our backyard and opening up my own TV instead of watching football or baseball, turning to the YouTube channel, watch the worship together. That's another way too. So encourage everybody to think about what you can do in your own community to make it fun, exciting, and being able to get together as a community.
I think the keywords are opportunity and empowerment. Yeah, and local, maybe. Yeah, just context. I think we have more or less reached the end of our hour together, and I thank each and everyone for being part of this, for attending, for participating. I thank all four panelists, and I wish you wonderful experiences, not just in June during Synod Assembly, let me know how this worked for you. Share your experiences, and I will put my email address into the chat as well. Yeah, so that's kind of anybody on the panel wants to add anything? Jody, Elaine, Karen, Simon?
Well, I wish everyone every success of trying a lay-led worship. It can become a most meaningful experience for every person in your congregation, and I would encourage you to try it.
Good. Okay, then I wish you all a good night and sweet dreams, and may you just continue serving the way you are right now and trying out new things. Good night, then.
Goodbye.
Good
Good night.
night.
Mhm.
Good night. Thanks to all the panelists.
Mhm.